Welcome in to 11 Personnel, presented by our good friends at Monticello Bank. Nick Roush, Adam Luckett, here with you on the 3rd of April. That's right, we've got April showers. They're bringing May flowers. They're bringing some spring football, too. It's pretty fun. We got to watch some before the storms rolled in, and we're going to talk about it today. But Luckett, why don't you just get that smug look off your face, you son of a bitch?
I'm surprised you're just not swimming in the streets. Just doing this podcast on a floating down 3rd Street over there.
There's a good amount of water on the ground. I am dealing with some afternoon fatigue after staying up late because they came in around midnight-ish or so, something like that. So dealing with kids and all that sort of stuff, it's just a little fatigued. You look well rested and maybe a little sunburnt.
I am both. Last night though, we tapped out early, so that obviously helped. Luckily, my kids slept through the night because there wasn't no arc storms coming through here in North Florida. So I've enjoyed my little time off, but I'm glad to be back. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
On our little website, get the KS board. Just for the entertainment value alone right now is very, very much worth it. People are going through it one way or the other, and that's an experience for everyone.
Why don't you just back that mic up just a little bit? You're a little hot, but you sound great, though. You sound great. You look great. There is a lot going on over at KS Board. UK1 will get you on there for 2 months for $1. So check it out. There's a lot of portal happenings. It was nice because I got to give spring practice updates yesterday. Like I couldn't hear one more edition of Mark Stoops saying, I just really like the team. I just really like where we're at right now. So it felt good to actually get to see them. And so I can be some eyeballs and earballs for Big Blue Nation to kind of talk about what the teams looked like so far. Although it was just one practice, and like we had a case of the winds. That corridor right around Kroger Field is always windy. But it was extra windier yesterday. I bet Jacob Callaway, if the wind hit right, could have kicked an 80-yard field goal.
Well, if they would have just built a links golf course, we could have hosted a British Open in Central Kentucky.
You ain't kidding.
Because that is exactly what you would want for that tournament. And I see Kevin Barbet right there in the middle of that drill, the new analyst. We'll get into that. I want to get into that a little bit, Nick. But I'll let you take the floor here and just kind of walk us through. Was it a full practice? Like, what was the setup? How many team drills did you get and all that good stuff? Let you take it from here.
First things first, it was your normal full practice, which rare for the spring, and it felt like there were more team periods than usual because you had a tempo period to start things off that I wasn't used to, and that was to really kind of get everybody fired up and kind of amp up the energy at practice. And then, you kind of get to the normal ebbs and flows, the ups and downs of practice, where it gets a little slow at times because they can't go hard the whole time. They got to do individual work. You'll have 7-on-7, small group stuff. They did a true inside drill where they're just kind of beating up on each other, running the football. But what I really liked, it was that, and Stoops has alluded to this throughout spring, they did a final team period, but they didn't just end with the final team period. They ended with a 2-minute drill. And they were rotating quarterbacks in. They were rotating different players in. They put, 2.5 on the clock. They had 1 timeout, go down the field and score, chains, everything's live, to really simulate and create a sense of urgency. So I liked it a lot in that regard. They ended up having to settle for a field goal from like the 30-something. Macklin had one of those plays where you thought he was going to do something miraculous, where he tipped the ball up to himself, and the ball is hanging in the air, and you think he's going to come down with it inside the 5, but he couldn't make it. And also, we got an all-time ass chewing from like I didn't know Bush Hamden had that in him, but defense brought a blitz, and DJ Miller had a 1-on-1, and he didn't go to him, and he was just like, which. We can just go ahead and get to the players. DJ Miller, that guy's going to be a ball player, Luckett.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's good to hear. Freshman, so I would obviously say tread lightly. But, I mean, he was a big recruiting winner. That was a guy we wrote and talked about a lot for a reason. Like, that was a big-time get highly productive player in St. Louis. And so, yeah, that's good to hear that he's passing the eye test early on.
He, I think, forget the exact words that Stoops used. I think he said he's a smooth operator, but I wish sometimes he was a little less smooth and just went a little bit harder. But LaDamian Washington, which I think they're just calling him LD, he was in his hip pocket the whole time because J.J. Hester was out. So when they went 2-minute drill, he had to be their second outside receiver along with Macklin. They had to play him. But, he had the most impressive catch of the day, which was just, all right, we're man-to-man on the outside. Blitz is coming. Cats picked it up, and he just caught it on some dude's head in team period. He's probably going to have, I don't know, 3 to 5 of those this year where they're just going to need to play him, and he's going to come in, and you're going to say, oh, wow, that guy's going to be awesome in the future.
So he's this year's Harley Gilmore is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. Right up that alley. The part that I can't figure out is where Quisenberry's going to fit in to this equation because he was just, if it was the twos, it's all right, well, when in doubt, just throw it to him. And he made every catch. Drop. Come on. And, just finding little soft spots in the zone between 6 and 12 yards down the field. It was just automatic. So I don't know what that means for this year, but after trying out the small slot guys for so long, that consistency, good to see that early on, only 10 practices into his high school senior season, basically.
Okay, now what I want to do is ask you some questions since you're the one who got eyes on it. So these will be questions not only I'm interested in, but I think most of our community at KS Board, most of our followers with KSR, I think these would be the questions they would ask. Mm-hmm. Is there a legit quarterback battle at all, or is it Zach Calzada clearly QB1 at this point?
They are separating snaps as if there's a quarterback competition. However, it feels like it's Calzada's, right?
Sure.
But they're what they are the clear top two though, and it's not even close. Bo Allen is probably a more serviceable third option than you're used to seeing. So those guys are going to get some good reps while the freshmen are just drinking from a fire hose. But I think it's clearly Calzada. And the way that Calzada, his presence, he has the old guy whipping everybody into shape. He brings a lot of energy to the football field that I think Boley still has to summon. Those throws are there, and there's some of the, but it just, you can tell the age difference, right? That Calzada's 25. Boley was a dude who reclassed and is going into his true sophomore season. There was one play in particular, they were great. Him and Kendrick Law, third and medium, he's finding somebody at the sticks. Usually a Law, sometimes a tight end. Willie Rodriguez had a pretty great one-arm snag in that 2-minute drill that moved the sticks on a first down. But Calzada's something goes wrong. It's he's all over them, but not in a bad way. It was a scramble drill, right? Play breaks down. Willie Rodriguez is oh, okay, he's running it. Let me start blocking. And then as he turns to block, Calzada goes to pitch it to him, hits him in the head, and then he's just and they run over and they do their thing, and that's part of the process. So we also had the point too where our guy Stephen Peak, he asked me the question: is Calzada throwing the ball too hard? Is there such thing as throwing it too hard? He's got an arm on him. He can put it in there.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Okay. The second question. Last time we saw Jager Burton, snapping accuracy was an issue. Was there snapping issues when you got to see him play center for what sounded like a full practice?
I didn't notice any. That wasn't a. It wasn't a. I was more impressed by just watching those road graders in the middle of the offensive line. Like we ain't seen holes like that in a while. And I think, I remember in January getting killed on the board because people were just mad at Mark Stoops. So if you say anything good, they're just going to be mad at you. But I heard that Jager had been kicking ass in the weight room and looked really good. He's enormous. I don't know. If you watch that video, you see him from on our YouTube channel. You see him from the pecs up, but he is the biggest he's ever been in his life, and it looks like by a lot. So to answer your question, I didn't notice it, and I came away with I maybe had an initial reaction where let's be real. There's a lot of good interior offensive linemen, and we've talked about on here how there could be a logjam there. You might see some guys leave. Well, I thought maybe they're just trying Jager out so he doesn't go in the portal, right? They need that depth there. I know they've got Unamba and Jalen, but they need to keep all these guys there where they have a true two deep. But actually, they played pretty well, all things considered. I thought that was the best looking group on offense. And Jager reinforced that by saying, it's pretty great that we're working on the same plane, which maybe you can speak to it more because you got a lot more experience playing the position. But it's 10 practices in, and he's already feeling in lockstep with Braun and with Jalen Farmer.
Yeah, I'll say this and I'll ask my next question, and then we can move on from that. I think it's interesting. Is Wibberley hurt?
That was part of it. He was dinged up early in spring ball, so it's all right. Well, we'll get Jager out there. He knows the offense better too, so this will kind of probably speed things up for work with our ones.
Yeah, I think part of it, you just have to say the obvious. This is something you might do just to keep someone around.
Yes.
And we've heard from Jager twice at the podium in a week now. He doesn't sound like anyone, like a player that has any is itching at all to enter free agency. Mm-hmm. And so it definitely feels like something you do to keep someone around. But I also think, you've got to point it. They purposely target Wibberley to be their starting center. And he's a multi-year guy. And so it'll just be interesting to kind of monitor how that shakes out. But I do think you hit on the depth piece. I think was big there. I think they had to get to a spot where they had just some comfortable depth, something they essentially have not had since 2020. And so I think they feel better about that, and they should. You just kind of look at the bodies. You go down the list of of who's in the room.
Well, the other knock on Wibberley, when we interviewed him, he's small. I mean, he just is, and Jager looks 30 pounds heavier than that guy right now. I don't know if that's to be the case. So that would at least check out there. But I just some of the small stuff that kind of can be lip servicey during this time of year.
I also wonder about that snapping stuff can be real, and it can cost you games. What happens if, think about this fan base if they start Jager and one goes over the head in the third quarter of a one-possession game against Toledo or something.
Well, I do think that there's a lot less pressure on him now. I don't want to say that because obviously he wants to perform well, but it did feel like we put all of the struggles on his. He was the guy that was supposed to. He
was kind of pinned on the board as he was the big ticket player for a unit that has struggled, right? Because he was such a high profile recruit and such a big recruiting win for Kentucky. And then essentially after they got him was kind of when everything fell, right?
Exactly.
After he committed was when everything fell to pieces.
And when he made mistakes, they were very obvious mistakes that any Johnny football would see and say, Jager Burton, that guy stinks, blah, 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 blah. But I think he's in a much, just speaking with him, a lot more comfortable in his skin than I think he was in the last couple of years when they were basically saying, save us, Jager. I think there's some comfortability playing alongside Jalen Farmer, who's got a good relationship with, previously established. And then with Josh Braun, where Josh Braun is, from my understanding, an over-communicator, which they were under-communicators last year, and it showed. So, it's one practice. It's early on. There's a lot of moving parts. But that was my number one takeaway is the interior offensive line looked like a quality SEC interior offensive line.
Okay, next question. Is the reason they look so good because the defensive front was underwhelming?
No. Now, it's different, though, Luckett, and I want to explain how just different it looks. But first, I need to tell you about our presenting sponsors at Monticello Bank. Maybe you want to build that link-style golf course, or just put a putting green in, or, maybe pimp out your garage and get a golf simulator in there. Use the money you got, the equity built up in your home, and unlock a home equity line of credit with Monticello Bank, proud presenting sponsors of 11 Personnel. Check out their HELOC specials at one of their 20 locations in 14 counties across Kentucky. They're going to get you a great rate to help you with the home improvements you need to really just pimp out your house this summer with our friends at Monticello Bank. You can also visit them online at nbcbank.com. Monticello Bank, where people matter, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Monticello Bank, proud presenting sponsors of 11 Personnel. Look at this defensive line just looks different because, A, you had staples in there for a very long time, but throughout the 13, 14 years of covering this Kentucky football team, I think defensive line's been one of the more high turnover assistant coaches, and Stewart has clearly been there the longest. You go through phases of, all right, we want read and react guys who are just going to stuff up the hole and then make a play. And then you'll have some of these coaches who are like, nah, just shoot the gap, get your ass back there, and then let's go create some havoc. They're not changing anything stylistically, but the personnel they have is much different than what they've had in the past. Those guys in that 2020 recruiting class where it was Josiah Hayes, Ox, Ribka, who else am I forgetting? But you got some big son bitches in there, right? It was a bunch of big dudes. I mean, David Gusta looks a foot shorter than Deion Walker. And I'm not going to lie, I was watching them. They were doing a double team drill, and I'm like, this guy's just going to get his ass kicked in there. How is he going to stop the run in the SEC? But he's got some wiggle that's hard to cover. So he might get blown up on one play in a double team, but then he'll get a tackle for loss on the next. Marquise Grace is we tried doing Pascal comps. Gerard Smith is Josh Pascal from that dude. That guy is Josh Pascal. But Marquise Grace, he's not. There's no Kentucky comp I got out there for him because he's a little bit lighter in the shorts. They tried an outside zone and he just beat him and then stripped Dante Dowdell. It was just almost instantaneously. It was an impressive play. So they got some guys with some juice in there. So to answer your question, specifically about the interior, is yes, I think there might be some interior issues at times with this team, particularly when Josiah Hayes wasn't doing team stuff yesterday, coming off that Achilles injury. But they have a lot more disruptors. I really like all their that Jaden Williams, man. He's got some bulldog to him. That guy's violent. He is violent inside.
Yeah, I think the biggest sell for the defense, and we've kind of talked about this, is that there's tangible reasons to believe this pass rush has got a chance to be really good.
Yeah.
When you look at Cam Olds can bend the corner, Steven Souls is an intriguing wild card.
Yes.
That you can use in pass rush situations. Gusta is you're right. He's not a two gapper. He's a penetrator. He's a north-south player. If he has to hold the gap and hold the point, he will struggle against SEC guards and centers. But if he's allowed to play upfield, He can knife through and he can create some havoc. And then Grace, like I think potentially, could be the best player on this football team. Like if it comes together, I mean, you see it with what he was able to do for a good team in the FCS last year. So they just got a lot of pieces, I think, on that front. Sounds like linebacker is still a concern.
Yes.
And then just secondary, like what was the overall takeaway? Who was playing nickel? Like all of that good stuff.
One more thing on the trenches before I forget. Gerard Smith, he was their first end out there, and he's going to be ready to play. He's going to be ready to play. So I wanted to and another funny quote that Jager had is he's like, some of these guys, it's like you got to reintroduce yourself to them because like Tavian Gadsden, he was one of those that got hurt last year in spring, didn't come back till late, and so it's almost like he got another redshirt year out of him, and it feels like you're getting a newcomer with some of those guys. But excuse me, I had a little cough there. To your point on the linebackers, it is Rayner and Afari. That's the Afari. You're hoping the reps help. But I admittedly was so locked in on the trenches that I was kind of distracted by who was playing where and what situations. Other than DJ Waller was getting a lot of cornerback 1 reps with JQ Hardaway. There's a lot of the bigger guys. I don't even remember Teron Nichols being out there. But I did notice Quaysheed Scott, particularly in one-on-ones. Like that guy flashed. And Cam Dooley was getting a lot of reps rotating in with the safeties. But I admittedly did not see who was walking up and playing nickel. So that's where you got me. You're going to have to ask Brad Lambert about that.
And last thing before we get to that.
Yep.
Like, Reggie Jackson was Mr. October. Is Jason Patterson Mr. Spring Practice?
Dude.
Because last year they could not stop talking about him in spring, and now it sounds like he's making a good impression here to start his second year in the program.
Yeah, So the fun thing about when you go to these practices, and you know this very well, we know this roster, especially once fall rolls around, we know all the 2 deep numbers and everything like that, right? This was kind of an intro where you've got 30 new players, but you know the numbers where it's like, oh, well, that's just some walk on. And when I first saw him go out there, I was like, 26? They throwing out some walk on from Cincinnati or something? Like that's because there is some kid, there's a 36 that's a running back that, plays deep down in there. I'm like, 26. And I look at the roster and I'm like, oh, hell, I totally forgot about Jason Patterson. It completely blanked on me because we never heard what that injury was, but he was averaging 5.5 yards a carry, had a big catch through the first 3 games of the season before it was abruptly ended. He was able to keep his red shirt. But when they were opening those holes in between, with that guard center guard, he was hitting them hard. He was getting north-south. I think most impressively was his pass catching ability. I mean, it was Ray Davis-like where, another wheel route to Jason Patterson. I mean, he caught 6, 7, God knows how many. And it's just like, he ended up open again. There goes Patterson running down the sideline. He was sure-handed. He was steady. He looked like an every down back. And I know he was rotating in with Wilcox. And I don't really know what Dowdell's situation was. Like, it felt like they were – I don't know how much of it was he doesn't know what's going on because he's new, or he's kind of banged up, so we don't want to play him a lot. But he eventually did get some reps, and like I mentioned earlier, Grace stripped him once. He had another big play out there, but like Patterson was on top of his stuff. They weren't having to yell at him to get back on the field because he was supposed to be on the field and he wasn't, right? Like he was the guy they were turning to, and we might have just slept on him a little bit, Mr. Luckett. We might have slept on him a little bit.
Yeah. I think you should read Nick's takeaways too. He kind of wrapped it all up. Well, everything he saw. I will say, even if Patterson looks like a guy you can count on, you got 3 backs.
That's true. You need more.
What if someone gets in? That's an attrition position. So like, I think they're a little playing with fire, even if with this Patterson development at that position, specifically. Like, let's be candid about this. They want to run the ball a lot, I think, this year.
Yeah.
So you got to have the guys to be able to do that. And I also appreciated your just, I dabble in player evaluations. Mm-hmm. I appreciate your just description for David Gusta. Just excuse my language, or excuse my French. He's just a big son of a bitch. I might use that this year.
Henry Boyer?
During our draft, or was it Henry Boyer? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry to Mr. David Gusta, but Henry Boyer. I might just use that when we have our draft show this year, 11 personnel draft show.
Big son bitch.
Yeah.
I mean.
Oh, here's Will Campbell, big son bitch.
I was talking to somebody who was at practice when they had practice at a scrimmage at Kroger Field, and he was running with the twos, and they're in the red zone, and he just turned around at the linebacker, and they just hit him as soon as he broke. And it's like, there's no, how do you, he is as big. He looks like one of those he looks like an offensive tackle that needs to add 40 more pounds, but he's every bit of 6'7", 6'8". He's bigger than Upshaw was, but I think this guy can block. So, I don't like making any sort of promises about tight ends or anything because you never know with that group. But they got a good three with him, Caddis, and Willie Rodriguez. So, and then we'll see with the freshman, Michael Skinner.
Yeah, well, I think you got, look at the construction of that room. They don't really have a true wide tight end. Losing Kamari Anderson, he was really their last true wide tight end they had. Mm-hmm. So they went out and get Boyer, and don't get it too twisted. He's here to line up next to the tight end and block, right? Well, he's here to block, and so that's going to be his role.
Formations where if you go on balance with Boyer, it's like, okay, well, there's a tight end on the backside or a tackle on the backside, right? He doesn't really look all that crazy. I did not see a lot of jet sweep stuff, but maybe that was just because they didn't do it that practice. But as I mentioned before, to kind of maybe put a bow on this, I am a little bit worried about where they stand at the receiver position because Kendrick Law they're going to get that guy the football, and he's a good ball player. Macklin, they want him to be outside. They want him to take the top off. They want to get explosives with him. But how many how many targets is that a game? I don't know. And after that, there's just not. I don't know. Hester wasn't practicing because of, you'll never believe this, injury. Stellato, I guess maybe he wasn't doing team, but he was doing individuals. Didn't notice him at all during team. So that might be an injury thing as well. And then, True Edwards, his status is up in the air still, even though we think he should be good to go. Really, what I'm saying is if they don't get True Edwards, they have to go get somebody in the portal because I just don't know. You're going to rely on your 5 freshman slots that you brought in? That doesn't sound like a winning formula. I'm worried about Calzada's targets. Who are the athletes that are going to make plays?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair, specifically if, availability for Hester and Stellato were a big part of their stories. Their college football stories was them not being able to play because of various injuries. So if they're having to sit out, that just you just put a pin in that when you see it at the first spring practice. This is the first time we get eyes on these guys, and they're not able to go for whatever reason. So that's something obviously you to monitor, specifically when you consider kind of their background in college. That's been a big part of their journey. So offensively, I think it sounds like, Nick, the real confidence is when this interior offensive line sounds like Kentucky's going to be better from the front.
Yep.
We'll see what happens with running back. Calzada looks like, he is what he is, which is an experienced quarterback, receiver question mark. And then defensively, linebacker, we'll see. Feel good about the front. And secondary is kind of TBD.
Yeah, and I like the athletes in the secondary, specifically the young guys. The true sophomores or redshirt freshmen. I don't, who knows how much eligibility they use, but Cam Dooley, Quaysheed Scott, I think are all those guys. And Ryan Nichols, the other second-year guy. I think that a lot of that defines the success of the secondary. Is how how much
throw Waller in there too as a second-year player.
Yeah,
for Kentucky. Yeah,
how much are you able to get out of those guys? How much are you able to develop them? Which might get us to our next point. But I do need to remind you that it's a great time to upgrade your wardrobe, Mr. Luckett, because
always
the ponies, they're firing up. The golfing, it's about ready to happen. And make sure you're swagged out. You got new golf shirts from Roback, RHOBACK.com. They've got the best polos in the business. I'm one of those, I dress it down when I go to the track. But if I'm at Keeneland, you need the blazer, but you do the golf shirt under it because it's like it might get toasty out there. That sun gets to shining. You need to take that blazer off. You're ready to go with the golf polos. They've got the best gear out there. They've also got some UK swag out there too. So go to roback.com. Use promo code KSR. You're going to get 20% off your first purchase at roback.com. Look, are you a golf trip guy? I know we got young children, but do you know a crew that does an annual golf trip?
Yeah, I'm aware of a few that do that. Different.
It's
there's different ways to do it. I know some that go to the same spot every year. I know some others that, kind of pick and choose where they want to go.
It's one of those things where it's like Michael Scott. He's an inside joke, but he loves them. But he'd like to be a part of them someday. It's same with the golf trip thing, where we kick it around every year, and then one or two guys are like, oh, let's do this or let's do this, and then nobody ever just makes up their damn mind and pulls the trigger. Because I would love to rock some Roback gear on a golf trip. So if you got an open space, let me know. I'm more than happy and ready. I'm more than happy and ready to go throw one of those on at the track. Maybe you do a little triple header next Saturday. So it's not official yet, Luckett. They have to get all of their ducks in a row. But next Saturday, that would be the 15th of April, I presume. Or is that the 12th? I'm bad with my dates right now, and I can't pull up a calendar. April 12th. There's going to be a Kentucky baseball game at Kentucky Proud Park. Keeneland's going to be in session. They're not going to delay it this time around. And you're going to get a Kentucky open practice at Kroger Field. That's the way they're branding it. It's basically going to be a Kentucky spring game. I think they're going to do they'll probably just butt up. I don't think they'll tackle to the ground. But that's going to be announced at some point. I wish we had the details before we went on air. But just tentatively have it in your plans. They're trying to navigate it around the baseball game and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully it's grab an early lunch at KS Bar, go watch football for an hour or two, and then head on over to the baseball stadium, grab you some cold ones, and watch the Batcats. So could be a great day at the Krog where you can watch this football team in action. And it'll be – I imagine it, Luckett, I got as much out of the game last year when it wasn't a quote-unquote spring game as I have in years past. Maybe even more because they ran real plays and Mark Stoops didn't make it vanilla soft serve.
Yeah, I think they could do better job promoting this.
Yeah, why wait till 9 days before? So we're going to get ahead of it for them.
So, yeah, the spring game is what it is. It's kind of an acquired taste, I would say, for a football game. It's Masters weekend. It's a lot of stuff going on, so kind of hard to get people there from that aspect. But I also get the sense that they maybe don't want to have a ton of people there, specifically to TV. They don't want TV to be there.
Do not want TV to be there.
So hopefully we get. I think the big value in this, Nick, is hopefully we get some, the ones versus ones here, and just see where everyone kind of stacks up, and just get eyes on some of these players that we've seen play in other jerseys, and now see what they look like, body type, and how they move, and all that kind of stuff in a Kentucky jersey.
And we do this at all these where you have the roster and you check up. Most embarrassed I've ever been at how many times I had to look at that thing. Especially that defensive line, because your 92s, your 95s, your 93s, 91s. And then sometimes they do the shirt roll too. And you can't really tell what the number was. I was a little embarrassed. Like it, I'm not gonna lie. Like who wears number 13 on defense?
JJ Weaver.
Exactly. It was. I kept getting thrown off, and I believe might be the new Maryland cornerback.
Yeah, Kevis Thomas is 30. I thought he was 19 off the top of my head, but yeah, I know he's a teen number.
Yeah. So I kept getting thrown off by that. So it was a little embarrassing, but we'll help it out with a little bit of spring practice. Speaking of help, Luckett, sometimes, like, you have a busy day and you miss some stuff that's happening, and then you look up and you see some news and you kind of just like go, what? Whoa. But like, I don't think people understand how big of news it is because they're just like, who is this guy that they made an off-field staffer? It's pretty big news. The off-field guys they hired to join Stoops' program this year, Mr. Luckett.
Yeah, and I wrote a column, KSR Plus, today. You should definitely go check that out and check us out right now. Take advantage of our current sign-up running with it's popping over there right now. With basketball portal and football stuff's about to pick up. Football portal's about to pick up. But anyway, I just wrote, like, Nick, in the offseason are the period of roster management, the GM era, right? We are in the GM era of college football. Almost, not all of them, but a lot of Kentucky's peers are going out and hiring people specifically with an NFL scouting background. And what is Mark Stoops doing? He's hiring coaches. He's getting as many like experienced coaches in that building as he can. So I just find that interesting. This comes after they hired Mike Hartline and Nate Fuqua, I believe is how you pronounce his last name.
Correct.
And so Kevin Barbay has been a offensive coordinator the last 4 years. Stints at Mississippi State and Houston did not go well, but he did some good things at Central Michigan and at App State. He was what I kind of classified in the column as a run-first offensive coordinator. They were a wide zone offense. His running back at Central Michigan ran for nearly 2,000 yards. And so he's just another, I think, kind of person in there to help make Bush Hamden's job easier. And with the new rule change, like Mike Hartline can go and coach the quarterbacks.
Yeah. Oh,
Bush
man. I feel like such an idiot too because he's older. He's got a little different look to him. But I was like, who is this guy that's in there like calling plays basically?
Right.
Oh, it's Hartline. Of course it is.
So he can do that, right? And there's a little clip that we have in our roll here that Peak had where they're all there. It's the quarterbacks. It's Hartline. It's Bush Hamden and it's Kevin Barbay all together, right there. And Derek Shea, who is kind of Bush's right-hand man. That's Shea on the left in the gray hoodie. Mm-hmm. That's Hartline with the backwards cap. It's Bush with the blue cap, and then with the blue sleeves under the Belichick T-shirt hoodie there is Kevin Barbay. So they're all together right there with the quarterbacks. And Derek Shea is kind of the run game coordinator, so he's just another guy that's there. So they've got kind of a big think tank going on. And offensively last year, you heard Mark Stoops say multiple times that Bush just had, like, he was dealt a bad hand, and that they needed to do a better job of kind of adjusting to what they were seeing, what teams were doing to them, yada, yada, yada. Like, I think this is a way to help him with that. Like, that these are a lot of people. These is kind of like people used to joke what Nick Saban and Kirby Smart used to do. You used to have all these big staffs. That's kind of what Kentucky has now, specifically on offense. And then defensively, Brad Lambert was Brad White's linebackers coach at Georgia.
Yeah, and then he gets
Jim Donning.
Yeah,
Jim Donning promised Brad White a scholarship after his first year. Jim Donning gets fired. They hire Mark Richt. Lambert leaves.
He goes with Lambert to Wake Forest.
He goes with and gets a scholarship. Then he does banking for a couple years. Lambert becomes a coordinator and essentially was like, come work for me. And he went GA'd for Lambert for 2 years.
Yeah,
so
Dean Hood was their defensive coordinator.
And Dean Hood was the defensive coordinator there at the same time. So we have the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Now, all that's missing really is Jim Grobe to come here and be an analyst. at this point. So yeah, that's
Brad
that
Lambert,
that's a,
he has 8 years of head coaching experience, 38 total years in college football.
and he was an accomplished coordinator. Now he head coached Charlotte, but Wake, it got away from them a little bit when he was at Purdue. There was one year with Jeff Brom. He had a good year.
They were good that year. That was
as
the one year
as their
the defense
defensive
was good. Yeah.
as their defensive coordinator. So that, and like on the release, it's specifically like he's the nickel coach.
Yep.
Like they're coming in, so that's another guy to help out with Chris Collins, Buffano, and then Fuqua can be the outside linebackers coach. So White can kind of oversee, and Brad Lambert's got a close relationship with Brad White. He's going to help him in a lot of kind of day-to-day task and operations. And so Kentucky's really beefed up this kind of support staff in the era of what many people are preparing for, it is more so having like front office in place. Right now, Kentucky believes they have that, but a lot of people are spending money on that, where Kentucky is spending resources on kind of building this kind of mega staff. So I just found that kind of interesting right now, what we've kind of see played out here in the last couple months, and we'll see how it plays out when the games start.
Well, there's zig and while others zag in that regard. And I think part of that is a belief that, like, those guys know how to evaluate talent still, right? Like, you don't have to be in the NFL to be able to evaluate and organize a roster, even if it is slightly tweaked. But here's the other part too, Luckett. How many times last year did we say this looks like a poorly coached team? They went and got some better coaches to help the coaches they were already paying a lot.
Yeah, and one thing I pointed out, there was a lot of fans that wanted staff personnel changes.
Yeah. They wanted people fired. They were out for blood.
Mark Stoops didn't make any.
Right.
The only one, and to kill Shorts left, he had to hire a receivers coach, but even then, that was not something planned. But the personnel changes he is making is in this role, and I think that's kind of an admittance of, like, we've got to get better at getting our players ready to play, and I think these moves are making some other people's plates lighter in the building and allowing just getting more minds in there to think. And I think the White one is really, like, him and Lambert, there shouldn't be any kind of adjusting. They should probably hit it off almost immediately. And then even for Bush Hamden, like, he's got a lot of guys now that he worked with. Like, he worked with Damian Washington. He worked with Derek Shea. The Barbet one is interesting. Like, and if you ever got in a situation where a move needed to be made for whatever reason, or if there's a change, if Stoops stays next year and there's a change at offensive coordinator, Barbet's probably going to be one of the top candidates for that. Barbet. Excuse me.
The part that I'm that it kind of pings my radar is that Bush and Barbet are both in kind of not necessarily do or die, but Barbet was going, and he was in that App State OC job has turned a lot of people into head coaches. Scott Satterfield, the Drinkwitz, like that's a job. That's a great stepping stone job. And he made what I think he would admit was a foolish career move, but probably got excited about the pieces to try to replace Mike Leach on a short notice when Zach Arnett took that job and he needed offensive coordinator. Like, that just, I'm sure the talent that they had assembled with Woody Marks and, like all these running backs that have been playing in college football playoff games. Who's the guy at Washington?
Will Rogers.
Yeah, Will Rogers. And then the receiver, like, they had a lot of offensive talent. Like, I'm sure Mississippi State fans are just like, I mean, we had everything teed up for this awesome year, and our coach just dies of a heart attack suddenly. Like, they were teed up personnel-wise, so I think Barbet probably got attracted by that. But trying to go from air raid to pro style, like, that was just going to be that. It was going to be asking for a lot. That was too much, too quick. Doesn't work. He goes to Houston, where Willie Fritz, I mean, that was one of the hot. Like, was Willie Fritz bigger than Old Napier? Like, did his name get up to that? Because I feel like that area of the country always has that G5 hot name, and Willie Fritz was that name for a while.
Yeah.
Gets the job at Houston. hires Barbet, and then like he's out of a job 11 games in the season. They only win.
Yeah, and then he gets rid of him to hire the guy he had at Tulane. Like I don't know why Slade Nagel, who's now Houston's offensive coordinator, I don't know why
they just didn't hire him to begin with.
Yeah, so he goes to works for 2 first-time head coaches, but yeah, he gets an opportunity and it does not go well at all. So now he's kind of in a reset. But I think more to your point, the point you were trying to make, correct me if I'm wrong, is that what happens to Bush Hamden if this doesn't go well, right?
And that's the same.
He's at a big point in his career. Yes,
exactly. And there's a guy who it kind of went the wrong way for him, but he's also in a reset. And so for Bush to keep kind of moving on up, he's got to have a big year this year. So
yeah, absolutely. From that lens, it's a big year, and like I think what they kind of said last year that I think the tough hand kind of excuse, lack of a better word, I don't know.
Yeah.
Reasoning. Like I don't think that's not at play this year. Like because Bush, his fingerprints are all over this roster. Like he helped handpick this roster.
Yeah.
Kind of helped handpick the coaching staff. If you kind of look at some of the moves, like he played a big role, I think, in the Damian Washington hiring, right? And he brought Shea with him as kind of his own QC, and he got to pick his quarterback. He inherited a quarterback. Now he got to pick his own starting quarterback. Essentially, pick all his receivers, right? Mm-hmm. Like this whole receiving core, and so it's a big year for him. Pick a starting running back, essentially, with him and Jay Boyer. So, I think it's a big year for him, and just overall, like Mark Stoops is investing in his coaching staff. He's given his coaching staff more resources, and so we'll see how that plays out when the games begin.
I want to switch gears momentarily, Mr. Luckett, and ask you about the coaching carousel. Not the football one, although if you want to talk about Frank Reich at Stanford, that was a wild story. Who's going to get this Texas A&M basketball job? We got a SEC basketball coaching vacancy. Nakos is throwing around Chris Mack's name. Surely Chris Mack isn't going to strike out at a return to Xavier and then stumble into Texas A&M, right? That would be.
I'd like to read the compare and contrast from Charleston to College Station. Living in Charleston for a year and then living in Bryan, College Station for a year.
You want to talk about polar opposites. That's just nutty.
I actually think it could work out for him because he is not the biggest show in town, and I think that was probably ultimately the biggest issue at Louisville.
Yeah, he couldn't drink Miller Lights up at Roosters without people talking to him,
Well, it wasn't even just that. I just think, there's certain pressure that comes with that, and, when it got bad, he was a little too prickly.
Yeah.
Not to mention, how he just totally fumbled that Dino Gaudio thing. What in the world was that?
We have to have wiretap
if you're Chris Mack's, I don't know, advisor, friend, you almost have to call him and be like, dude, what in the world are you doing? You've got this great job you've waited your whole life for, and you're doing this nonsense for no reason. Wilbur brings it out of him, I guess.
I just love that they've had multiple extortion attempts for the U of L basketball coach within a 10-year period.
I think what really happened was the Bengals won a playoff game, and he's like, you know what? They can make the Super Bowl.
And they did.
And I can't go because I got to coach. So I'm just going to quit. Quit out loud, but turn my quiet quitting into loud quitting.
Yep.
And get fired somehow. And then guess what he got to do? He got to go to the Super Bowl.
I'm glad Chris Beard didn't go there, though.
But Maryland, if he coached at Maryland, they would not pay for him to go to the Super Bowl. He would have to pay on his own dime to go anywhere. Kevin Willard was apparently paying for these trips they would make. So if they had to go to Los Angeles, no per diems for Kevin Willard.
Oh, man. The college basketball coaching carousel, I did not expect it to get this wonky, but Kevin Willard certainly made it the driving force.
Man,
and Buzz Williams just refusing to sit still for anywhere more than 6 years.
Yeah, I think for Buzz, I'm going to get to Kevin Willard in a second. I got more Kevin Willard content and opinions. But Buzz, I think for him, one, he's a little odd. Like, he's got some quirks to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so but I think he knows that. I think he knows if he stays too long, he would wear people thin. Yeah. And I also think he desperately wants like a big job, a big name job, like a Louisville, like a Kentucky, like an Indiana, like a North Carolina, like a UCLA. Name. He wants a brand name, but he knows like the best path for him is probably to move, keep winning, and then eventually get this. And this is a path, I think, to that, knowing that, you know, A&M, it's hard. That league's hard. Now you get to go to Maryland. You get to coach. You know, he's coached in like all the power conferences now, except with Pac-10's dead. So now he gets to go and try to build Maryland up. Then it's like I got to do this everywhere. Give me a chance to. So I get that. But for Willard, Nick,
quickly though, I wanted him to go to the Big 12 though. Like I needed him to pull off the quadfecta. Like I need Zadarius Smith to get signed by the Bears so he can play for every AFC North team.
Yeah. But for Willard, it very struck me as like, oh, you really just don't get it. Like football is paying for this, for everything. They are going to get some money. Like, and Maryland has financial. Like they're going to get paid first. Like that's just how it's got to work. Mm-hmm. That you're going to get yours, but they've got to get paid, and he just didn't get that, right? You know, he's very much Big East.
Yeah, and that's why he's going back, and that is where the Big East does get a leg up, is because while the revenue may not be as much, they get all the piece of the pie. They don't have to share it with anybody.
Yeah, that's true, but there are also a lot of small Catholic schools with not very big endowments, so it's not as easy for them like to generate the money,
revenue, yeah.
And they're also not getting any football. Like they're not getting the TV money that
the annual $50 million a year that the SEC gets.
Yeah, they're getting they're getting peanuts and chump change from Fox for their basketball deal, but they're not getting, and they're not big schools. Like I know that's like people are like, oh look, they can go spend all this money. It's like but they're not how much revenue do you think they're generating?
The math ain't always mathin'.
Where do you think this money it's supposed to come from the schools? Now we'll see like how they kind of balance out this NIL with this clearinghouse that Mitch Barnhart sounds like might be running once that gets passed. But it's got to come, like they got to generate the revenue. So I just like these, maybe like Villanova, maybe that's the advantage they can have. But overall, I just don't know if those Big East schools are going to be able to generate, because I think people just forget that it's like the University of Texas is not even close to, Xavier. Yeah. They're like, they might as well be, sun and winter. They're just two different things.
His press conferences were at least entertaining, even though I know that Maryland fans were like, really, you had to just I won't use the same words that Scott Van Pelt used, but he's like, yeah, it's one thing to leave us, it's another thing to crap on our front door on the way out.
Yeah, he was being a jerk, just a New York jerk.
Well, it's the Rick Pitino tree. Rick Pitino coaching tree.
It was just like, go on. I mean, they're gonna play. Like that's how basketball works. See, we'll play each other eventually, and so.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see it unfold. You got who we picking to win it all?
I think Auburn and Duke are the best two teams. I'd probably have to say Duke right now, just because I think they're just a little bit. I think over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I thought Auburn was better than I think Duke has hit another gear. So I think Duke, it'll be a close one, but I think Duke and Auburn. I love Auburn kind of in that matchup. You get a little revenge spot against Florida, but a Duke over Auburn for the national title.
I'm complete opposite of you. Although I do believe that Houston is our last hope. Like I think Duke is beating whoever. I think they match up with Auburn and Florida. Like they can win that game. But I think Houston can turn it into such a physical meat grinder, and you've got the revenge factor at play for the Cougs, that I think they actually could get it done. Especially with if Duke's not making their threes, they are a different team. I know Flag is dynamic and can score in a bunch of different ways, but when Proctor's not hitting, if you can stop Knuppel, like how many open shots did we see them miss against Kentucky? Oh, I know this was a light year ago, but I think they're good enough to rattle them from the outside. So I'm going to ride with Houston, and some of this is a heart play. But I also think Florida just I'm waiting for a big Alex Condon game, and I'm waiting for all of the you've seen one game they have this or they have that. Get them all firing on the right cylinders. Watch Bruce Pearl sweat, and some of it is I hate Bruce Pearl so much, but
but I love the match, the revenge spot, and it's student versus teacher, too. Typically, the teacher wins these kind of high leverage games, especially the student's first time being on a stage this big.
Right, that's true.
And then I will say the Duke Houston matchup, if Houston can turn them over, I wouldn't say Duke's the best ball handling team. Houston is going to trap and try to get turnovers, but if they aren't, they're going to give up wide open shots. And if Duke's hitting anywhere near their normal clip, I think there's definitely a chance Houston could beat them. Also, there's a chance Duke could blow them out because of just stylistically how Houston plays.
Really need them to have a Tennessee first half performance. Just go out there and miss all of your shots, Duke. Please. Yeah.
That was honestly the most probably the most predictable result. You were just you knew Barnes, you knew somewhere along the line that he was just we're gonna have a big brick turd dropped in this tournament. That they haven't dropped yet, and that's the game they have to get over and win. When they drop the turd, can they win the turd game? And they didn't. They played great against UCLA. They played great against Kentucky. And then it was of course, this is where they totally dropped the brick.
Well,
no pun intended, because there was a lot of bricks in that building.
You know who's not going to drop a brick on you, Luckett?
Who's that?
Andy Ludicky. He's going to be Mr. Reliable because he knows his franchise business quite well. He's a franchise consultant. So if you think about, diversifying your income portfolio, that's a fancy word for also saying get a second job or get a brand new career. Andy has the services to help point you in the right direction for the right franchise industry to get you going. So visit myperfectfranchise.net or email him, Andy@myperfectfranchise.net. To get in touch with Andy, his services are 100% free. He's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. That's Andy Ludicky with My Perfect Franchise. He's helped plenty of folks who are fans of On3, and he's ready to take your call at 404-973-9901. Lucky, before we end the show, got to have somewhat of a somber send-off for one of the Big Blue Nation's best. We got some unfortunate news this morning, and Dean Wells, former Kentucky Wildcat, he passed away at 54. Leaves his wife Lisa and his 2 children behind. One of the South End's finest. He did not have the reputation that Jerry Bell brought from the South End to Lexington, or maybe Nick Roush, but like Nick Roush, big fan of the Ponies, big fan of football, big fan of the Cats. He spent 10 years in the NFL, and I was talking to him, so you Seahawks guy, Panthers guy, and I'm just a Kentucky guy, right? My kids like the NFL, and I'd watch it if it's on, but I'm all Cats. He was a Kentucky fan through and through, and was an absolute ass kicker. He still holds the single game record for most sacks in a game with 5. That one's going to be hard to surpass. A stand-up guy, stand-up football player. I was one of the thousands of kids who attended the Dean Wells football camp out at Holy Cross that he hosted there for, Lord knows how long. But it was very cool to be oh, there's an NFL player who grew up down the street from here, who's one of us. And he was one of us till the very end. Was thrown a curveball with leukemia, fought it like hell. But cancer sucks. Cancer sucks. So we're sad to see him go. It's the worst. And our prayers are with his family. Big Blue Nation lost one of its best. Well, with that, Luckett,
Well said.
I guess if you want some more, you got any locks for the Final Four this weekend, though? Are they going to be KSR Plus locks?
No, we are shifting into golf mode.
Okay.
And we're going to have to record before Thursday so we can get some Masters picks out there.
I will share my prep picks. We got 3 prep races. It's supposed to be on Saturday, but Keeneland moving back because of the inclement weather really is a major bummer. But I'll be sharing some of my horse picks over at KSR Plus. Lots of intel being shared at the transfer portal from Jacob Polachek and Jack Pilgrim and all of our fine folks over there at KSR. But we appreciate you joining us. We'll have more spring football, wrapping things up next week. Probably rapid reaction or something like that after the game Saturday. A lot more coming your way. For Adam Luckett, I'm Nick Roush. Go Cats and go Crow Green.